The abrupt retreat of the formidable Indian contingent that had driven us from their encampment could signify only one possibility: a subsequent assault on their camp, whether actual or perceived, from an alternate direction. Later in the afternoon, at approximately 4:30, a group of 12 comrades was observed ascending the bluffs. Some individuals had dismounted in the woods or just outside the area when the command left and had stayed concealed until it appeared that the Indians had vacated the vicinity. They then emerged and proceeded on foot in the direction taken by Reno. Initially, the group comprised 14 members. However, two chose not to attempt an escape during daylight and opted to remain behind, ultimately being discovered and killed by the Indians later on. The group that successfully escaped included George Herendeen, a scout, along with 6 soldiers from G Troop, 3 from M Troop, and 2 from A Troop. During their escape, they encountered only 5 Indians, whom they easily repelled without incurring any casualties. After fording the river, which was waist deep, one of the soldiers from A Troop found my horse grazing peacefully where I had left him. He brought the horse along and later returned him to me, having presumed I had met my demise. Remarkably, not a single piece of my equipment or personal belongings was missing, despite the horse being in close proximity to the Indian line for nearly 3 hours. It is worth noting that another group of our men had also remained hidden in the woods, unbeknownst to the first party. This second contingent included Lieutenant Dirudio, Private Tom O'Neill from G Troop, Frank Gerard, the interpreter for the Re-Scouts, and William Jackson, a mixed heritage scout. After enduring several narrow escapes and being absent for approximately 34 hours, these 4 individuals reached our lines late in the evening of the 26th, raising the total number of personnel known to have been left behind during the charge to 18. It is probable that additional individuals were unable to escape. Shortly after the return of the 12-man party, we received orders to assemble around 5 p.m. and mounted our horses, proceeding in the direction believed to have been taken by Custer. A brief ride along the bluffs, which obscured our view of the Indian village, led us to a ridge that provided a partial glimpse of what would later be recognized as Custer's battlefield. We observed numerous Indians in the distance, as well as some in closer proximity. Before long, they began to advance towards us, and our advance unit under the command of Captain came under fire. The entire command was subsequently ordered to retreat, and we returned to our previous position. By this time, the Indians had completely encircled us, unleashing a fierce barrage of gunfire. The supply train, along with the wounded men and horses, was positioned in a depression between 2 ridges. After nightfall, scouts were sent out to locate any signs of Custer's command, but they quickly returned, indicating that the area was teeming with Native Americans. Subsequently, a trumpeter was instructed to sound various calls from a nearby elevation, with the intention of reaching Custer's command and directing them to our location. Facing the direction Custer had taken, the trumpeter played 3 or 4 calls with great effort, the final one being taps, which I distinctly remember. This call is traditionally sounded after tattoo, signaling the extinguishing of lights, and is also played during a soldier's burial. Was it mere coincidence that the trumpeter chose to play taps on that quiet night, or was there a deeper significance? As the echoes dissipated into the night, a heavy sense of grief enveloped us. Nearby, the fresh, shallow graves of our fallen comrades from that afternoon lay hastily covered by their fellow soldiers. There was no formal ceremony, just a simple trench with a thin layer of soil vulnerable to the next rainfall. In the valley below, along the steep hillside, and near the woods, more members of our command remained unburied, casualties of that tumultuous retreat. This encounter transcended mere military tactics. It was imbued with deep emotion and historical significance. Grant began by reminiscing about their earlier meeting during the Mexican-American War, establishing a tone of mutual respect despite their opposing positions. The 2 men had previously crossed paths as young officers. Now they found themselves on opposing sides of one of history's most devastating conflicts. As they deliberated over the terms of surrender, Grant exhibited unexpected generosity, permitting Confederate officers to retain their sidearms and horses. This act reflected Grant's recognition that reconciliation would necessitate compassion rather than humiliation. He understood that many Confederate soldiers were merely seeking to return home after years of fighting for their convictions. As Lee prepared to depart from McLean's house after signing the surrender terms, he lingered on the porch, gazing into the distance where his defeated army lay. It was a deeply moving moment as a leader confronted the dual burdens of loss and the future of his men. Observers remarked on the grave atmosphere as Union officers stood in solemn respect while Lee departed to convey the news of surrender. The emotional significance of this surrender transcended mere military defeat, resonating profoundly within both armies. Soldiers from both sides expressed their feelings through cheers and tears upon receiving the news, recognizing a shared experience of sacrifice and suffering endured over 4 harrowing years of conflict. Lee's exit from McLean's house symbolized not only a physical departure, but also an emotional farewell. He left behind not just his command, but a way of life that had shaped his identity for so long. As he rode away from Appomattox courthouse, many experienced a deep sense of loss, mourning not only for their cause but also for their leader, who had inspired them through numerous battles. Lee's surrender at Appomattox did more than signify the cessation of hostilities. It established a foundation for reconciliation in a nation fractured by war. While many commemorate this moment as a clear conclusion to the Civil War, it is crucial to acknowledge its complexities, including the personal struggles faced by leaders like Lee, who confronted overwhelming challenges and made agonizing choices in the name of honor. In hindsight, history often neglects these human aspects, the emotional struggles endured by both leaders and soldiers during this critical juncture in American history. The legacy of Appomattox serves as a poignant reminder that even in the face of defeat, there exists a potential for understanding and healing. In the aftermath of Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, a wave of emotion swept across both the North and the South. For numerous Southerners who had bravely fought under Lee's leadership, there existed a complex mix of despair and relief. They felt relief that the fighting had come to an end, yet despair over the uncertain future that awaited a nation now divided and in need of reconstruction. In Washington, D.C., news of Grant's victory at Appomattox spread rapidly. President Abraham Lincoln perceived this moment as a chance for reconciliation rather than vengeance. He famously articulated that their actions should be guided by a principle of malice toward none for those who had opposed them. Nevertheless, this perspective was not universally embraced. Certain factions within Congress pushed for severe repercussions against former Confederates, while others called for a more lenient approach, highlighting the divergent opinions on the best path to reunite a fractured nation. As Reconstruction commenced earnestly following Lee's surrender, significant questions emerged regarding the integration of millions of freed slaves into society, alongside addressing the grievances of Southern whites who felt marginalized after the loss of their former way of life. What is often overlooked in historical accounts is the deeply personal nature of the surrender for both generals involved. For Robert E. Lee, it symbolized not only a military defeat, but also a profound personal failure. A man who had devoted his life to defending his convictions now found himself unable to overcome insurmountable challenges. Lee's sense of pride significantly influenced his actions throughout this ordeal. He grappled with the acceptance of defeat, even as many around him encouraged him to surrender sooner. His hesitation was rooted in more than mere military considerations. It was deeply intertwined with an ingrained sense of honor that was closely linked to Southern identity during the war. Ulysses S. Grant approached this pivotal moment with a pragmatic outlook, shaped by his extensive experience alongside soldiers who had endured significant hardships during the conflict. He possessed a deep understanding of the implications of ongoing warfare for both factions involved. The meeting at McLean's residence became a powerful symbol, not only signifying the conclusion of hostilities, but also illustrating how two former adversaries could unite in the face of adversity, despite their deeply entrenched ideological differences. In subsequent reflections on this encounter, both generals remarked on their contrasting appearances. One was impeccably dressed, while the other bore the marks of travel in his attire. Nevertheless, they shared a profound mutual respect, cultivated through years of intense combat characterized by considerable bloodshed. This stark disparity not only underscored their individual journeys, but also served as a poignant reminder of the shared humanity that persists even amidst the ravages of war. It illustrated how individuals on opposing sides can discover common ground when confronted with challenging decisions that impact countless lives during times of conflict. As the tumult of that significant day at Appomattox subsided, the sounds of battle gradually faded into quietude. However, the consequences of Lee's surrender would echo through the ages. It represented not merely a military defeat, but a significant moment of introspection for a nation wrestling with its identity. General Lee, once celebrated as an emblem of Southern valor, now embodied the intricate realities of honor and sacrifice. What truly unfolded in those final moments of negotiation? What thoughts occupied Lee's mind as he prepared to address his troops, aware that he would have to deliver the news of their capitulation? And how did Grant, a commander who had fiercely opposed him, perceive this historic occasion? The surrender at Appomattox marked not just an end, but the commencement of a challenging and lengthy path toward reconciliation, a journey laden with obstacles, aspirations, and the vision of a united nation. In contemplating this significant event, it is essential to consider how we can pay tribute to the insights gained from our history. What does it signify to achieve dignity in loss? Furthermore, how can we integrate these lessons into our contemporary lives?